Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Today I want to talk about mining policies. We're proceeding with our discussion on the mining sector, mining law, and critical minerals. And today we want to talk about the regulation of the mining sector, specifically with a focus on mining policies. Because when it comes to mining regulation, you have the mining policies, you have the laws, and then you have the laws at the national level, you have the laws at the international level, and then there are also other cross-cutting laws that have an impact, although they might not be termed as mining laws. For instance, the constitution, national constitutions, they are often they often have the founding principles when it comes to governing the mining sector. It could be like one principle, or it could be like two provisions talking about natural resources management. And then from the constitution, you have like mining policies that set the scene of how the mining sector is supposed to be governed in a country. Then you have mining laws, and you have mining laws at the national level. And then at the regional level, you find that most countries that belong to different regional organizations, there are also those important laws or regional laws and regional instruments that have an impact of how the mining sector is supposed to be governed. And then also at the international level, you have international laws that have an impact on how the mining sector is supposed to be governed. So basically, that's all about the regulation of the mining sector. But in today's discussion, we want to talk about mining policies. So if you, I'm going to share my slides. Just for the introduction, I'm Dr. Victoria Nalule, and I'm an expert in energy and mining law. And also, I'm an arbitrator, so I do arbitration and dispute resolution, specifically in the energy infrastructure and mining sector. So, regulation of the mining sector, we have to first understand, like I've already mentioned, we have laws and policies that are essential in regulating the mining sector. These laws and policies, they establish the rights of the parties. For the mining sector, you basically have three categories of parties or interested stakeholders. You have the host state, uh, through the government that has to issue out mining licenses. You have mining companies, and in most cases, these are international mining companies that have the capital that is essential for the mining sector to be developed. And then you have the local communities. These are the host communities where the minerals are being extracted from. They have a big say on how the mining sector is to be established, because if you go to a host community that is hostile towards your investment, then there are going to be certain risks when it comes to the development of the mining sector. And then you also have like mining policies establishing the obligations of the parties. So first they would establish the rights. I mean, like mining laws and policies, they would establish the rights of the parties, but then also the obligations. So mining laws can establish what the state has to do, what the investor has to do, but then also we have to note that detailed obligations are often found in the mining contracts. And then also, these regulations contain the fiscal expectations, the fiscal regime governing the mining sector, royalties, taxes. What share will the government take? What share will the host communities take? What share will the investors take? So those are the fiscal expectations, and these have to be negotiated and established clearly in the governing regulations or even policies and contracts, because failure to agree on this on the fiscal expectations or even the obligations, it could be the source of disputes. So it's always important for the relevant regulations to clearly outline the rights, obligations, and fiscal expectations. And then also, obviously, we are in an era of climate change, and a lot of focus has been put to environmental protection. And with mining, because it's an extractive industry, also we have to ensure that the environment is protected. The obligations that relate to environmental protection, like mining closure, decommissioning, all those issues have to be taken into consideration when we're talking about the mining sector. And even before the mining takes place, we have to ensure that there is the environmental impact assessment. So all these environmental obligations have to be taken into consideration. And this can only be done through proper regulation of the mining sector by establishing the relevant laws, policies, and also ensuring that the contracts, mining contracts, are negotiated in a way that is fair and in a way that addresses all the issues of the various stakeholders, like we have mentioned. So today, we want to focus on mining policies. So a policy, basically in simple terms, a policy generally, it refers to a system of principles agreed so by a group, organization, or governments to guide decision making. So a policy is basically it's a system of principles. It can be a document that contains principles of how a certain issue is to be governed. And then when it comes to mining policy, if we bring in this simple definition and we apply it to the mining sector, a minerals policy can be defined as the entirety of actions of a state for influencing supply of and demand of mineral resources on its territory and beyond that. So mining policies, basically, they also offer guidelines and principles, first of how the mining sector is going to be governed, and then secondly, if the country is an importing country, how they want to ensure that they import those minerals, what are the key guiding principles, and if a country is an exporting country, how to ensure that they can benefit from the export of those minerals. So the mining policy will be influenced by the status of the country, whether it's an importing country or it's an exporting country, and also the expectation of that country. What exactly do they need the minerals for? How much minerals do they need? We are in an era of critical minerals because we want to transition to a low carbon economy, and critical minerals are playing that major role for the energy transition. So most countries that are reliant on critical minerals, they have policies that are intended to ensure that they have security of supply of those critical minerals. We're seeing China, the policies it is putting forward, and also how it's relating with other different countries when it comes to mineral supplies. And then we're seeing the USA now stepping in to ensure that it also has its share when it comes to critical minerals. So depending on the country's interests or the country's interests or what they're putting forward, they would establish their mining policies dependent on their priorities when it comes to the mining sector. So a mining policy is essential in the regulation of the sector as it is the benchmark for all other relevant laws. Like we have mentioned, a policy basically is a system of principles. So a mining policy is a benchmark for all other laws because this policy it would have the goals and objectives of the country's mining sector. And it's based on those goals and objectives that other laws and regulations will be established to ensure that the main objectives of the mining policy can be achieved. So the mining policy is like the benchmark, is the foundation that would influence how other laws and regulations are going to be established in a country. And a minerals policy highlights the key issues to be considered in the governance of the mining sector. Each country has different priorities when it comes to the governance of the mining sector. Some countries want to use minerals for economic development. Other countries want to use minerals to go through industrialization. Other countries want to use minerals to build, to support them to become the main players when it comes to the energy transition, especially the countries that are moving forward with investing more in critical minerals. So depending on what the host government wants, the direction it wants to take, they would have to establish a mining policy that is in alignment with those tailored objectives. And in that case, it wouldn't be prudent to just get a mining policy from one country and then you copy and paste to your country because you don't know what were the specific objectives of that country. What was the goal for them to establish that mining policy? So each country has to look at its unique challenges, unique opportunities, and also the economic status, the social status, and formulate mining policies that are in alignment with those unique challenges and opportunities. So, besides mining policies, we note that there are different policies that countries or often establish. We have the general economic policies, you have foreign policy, which is essential as it sets the objectives of trade and development through diplomatic dialogue with other countries. A trade policy secures access to minerals through multilateral contracts. Then you have the economic policy that covers issues relating to the government budget, taxation, labor markets, and it also greatly influences state politics. So we have different policies that play a major role in different countries. But however, we have to note that the mining policy has to be in alignment with these different policies. For instance, a mining policy has to be in alignment with the country's economic policy because it's the economic policy that is going to set the government budget taxation. So the government would decide that, okay, this is our budget for this year, for this financial year, and we're expecting to get this percentage of revenue from the mining sector. So the economic policy, in a way, would be influencing the mining policy. And then you also have the trade policies that are essentially intended to ensure access to minerals. Depending on whether a country is an exporting or importing country, the trade policy would have an impact on the mineral policy. Because if a country has minerals and they want to export them, then they would look at their trade policies to see how they can align their mining policies with their trade policies. So the different policies in a country do have an impact on the mining sector. So they can impact the minerals policy, but also the minerals policy can impact these policies. So it's always good when you're talking about the mining policies to think about the different policies in a country and also analyze, evaluate how exactly are these policies influencing the mining sector, or in summary, how exactly are these policies influencing the mining policy or the minerals policy. So we can take an example by asking ourselves, what is the link between economic policy and mineral policy? There is a strong connection between a mineral policy and an economic policy, and as such, a mineral policy should indeed put into consideration the social, economic, political, and environmental objectives of the country. We have already mentioned that the economic policy would include issues to do with budgeting, taxation, and also government expectations when it comes to the mining sector, implying that if the government expects a lot of taxation from the mining sector, then the minerals policy would be formulated in such a way that the mining sector can contribute extensively to the country's revenue. And also, the mining contracts were also negotiated in such a way that the government can have a bigger share of the revenue through royalties. The different taxes that will be uh, set up for the investor would also have to be impacted by the economic policy. So we realize that the mining policy does not work in isolation. It has to be in alignment with the different policies in the country. And also, it has to take into consideration the economic aspects political aspects, and the environmental objectives of the country. So what are the common objectives of the mining policies? Mining policies, each country would have different objectives depending on what that country wants to focus on, depending on the country's priorities. But there are certain objectives that are common for different mining policies. For instance, for developing countries that are that have both artisanal mining, small-scale mining, and also large-scale mining, you might find that for countries that have challenges to do with ASM, the mining policy would specifically mention the need to regulate the artisanal and small-scale mining sector. And then the mining policy would also have an objective to strengthen local capacity for mineral development, to promote private sector participation, to develop and strengthen local capacity for mineral development, to address child labor in the mining sector, to promote gender equality in the mining sector, value addition, and revenue generation. So these are some of the common objectives that can be found, especially in developing countries where artisanal mining is rampant. You find that the mining policy would specifically mention the need to regulate and improve on the artisan and small-scale mining sector. And this objective now would be the benchmark for establishing laws that are specifically targeting ASM mining. And then the other important thing, we have all heard of local content, where people, local communities, local goods and services can be used in the mining sector. So mining policies could also have an objective of strengthening the local capacity for mineral development. And then private sector participation. The private sector plays a big role when it comes to the development of the mining sector through investments. So mining policies would often have an objective that promotes private sector participation. And then for some developing countries, child labor is rampant, especially in ASM. So mining policies would have an objective to address child labor, because we have seen many reports like from Save the Children, where they're showing children as young as 8 years being involved in mining. So it's always important for the mining sector, for the mining policy to have that specific objective aimed at addressing child labor. And then gender equality has also become a key issue in different mining in different countries. And we're seeing various initiatives aimed at promoting gender equality in the mining sector to ensure that both men and women are well represented in the mining sector, and also to ensure that the women can be able to benefit from the mining sector. So the mining policy would also often include an objective for gender equality. And then the other important thing, especially for developing countries, is value addition, because in most cases, most developing countries are simply exporting their minerals. So value addition is very key in ensuring that the country benefits from the mining sector. And as such, this is a key objective that definitely needs to be included in the mining policy. So there are different examples of mining policies. I would recommend that you get a country, pick a country that has minerals, and look out for their mining policy and find out what are the main objectives of that mining policy. In this discussion, I've looked at the 2018 Uganda mining policy, whose main goal is to develop the mining industry through increased investment, value addition, national participation, and revenue generation, to contribute significantly to the socioeconomic transformation and poverty eradication. So that is the main goal of the 2018 Uganda mining policy. But take your time to look out for mining policies in your own country, or if your country has no minerals, find mining policies in different countries like Botswana, Australia, China, the US, the UK. They have mining policies, Indonesia, and look out for the main goal and main objectives of that country's mining policy, and ask yourself if these goals are in alignment with the country's challenges, economic challenges, social challenges, and also look out for that country's economic policies, the trade policies. How exactly are they impacting the mining sector? Are they influenced by the mining sector? Is the mining sector influencing those other economic policies in a country? So use that free time to use some free time to look out for the different mining policies. So now the question is, how can a mining policy be effective? Or how can mineral policies be effective? Like we've mentioned, the mining policy basically sets the foundation for the regulation of the mining sector. So a mining policy in itself cannot be effective unless if there are clear laws that have been established to govern the mining sector. And in this regard, you have to take into consideration the fact that for a mining policy to be effective, the country has to proceed to establish laws and regulations that would ensure that the mining sector is well governed. So there should be clear laws and regulations that ensure the sustainable exploitation of resources and that can create set mineral rights and a favorable fiscal policy for the investors. So just because a country has a strong mining policy, it does not mean that the sector would be governed effectively. The laws have to be there that ensure that the state and the host communities can benefit from their minerals. The fiscal policies in those laws have to be competitive. They have to be effective to ensure that the country can get enough revenues from the mining sector. So a minerals policy would definitely stipulate the role of the state and the private sector, the institutions responsible for mining, but that is not enough. The country has to proceed to establish competent laws and regulations. And also, the country has to proceed to negotiate fair contractual terms. Because we often find a country has a very good mining policy. The mining policies are good on paper, but in practice, you ask yourself, why exactly is this country not benefiting from the mining sector? It could either be that the laws are not effective, and where the laws are actually good, the institution frameworks are not that effective, because you also need institutions that are going to implement the laws. So implementation is very key. You need strong, competent institutions. And then most importantly, you need a strong negotiating team. Because if you negotiate provisions in a contract that are only favoring the investor, then the host state will be left out. So the starting point for ensuring that the mining policies can actually be effective is to have a policy itself, establish the laws and regulations, and then also after that, ensure that you have established a system that would ensure that countries can be able to negotiate fair terms. Otherwise, we're going to have strong laws, we're going to have strong policies, but if the negotiations are weak, then you're going to negotiate weak contracts that will only benefit the investors, leaving the host states and the host communities to only suffer the negative impacts associated with mining. So, like I mentioned earlier, different countries have different objectives, and these objectives are influenced by whether a country is an exporting country or an importing country. So for importing industrialized countries, they are more focused on ensuring guaranteed supplies of minerals at low prices. So these countries would establish their mining policies with the main focus of security of supply of minerals at low prices. So if you are an exporting country and you are not well organized and you're only focused on what the importing country is telling you, that means that you're going to export your minerals at low prices, and that's going to have an impact on the economic development of your country and your citizens. But for the importing country, because in most cases, they know what they want, they would negotiate in a way that they get those minerals, there's that security of supply, but also they would negotiate to ensure that they get the minerals at low prices. So that is the main objective of importing industrialized countries. So in that instance, importing countries consider various aspects, including foreign trade aspects and domestic economic aspects. Because remember, we mentioned that various other policies have an impact on mining policies. For instance, the foreign policy or the trade policy and the economic policies would influence the mining policies. So if the importing country, they have a trade policy that is really focused on critical minerals, that would be their main goal in the mining sector, to ensure that they get the minerals at a low price. Importing countries are also more concerned with mineral supply policies, whereby they ensure the security of supply of the necessary raw materials with fewer disruptions. You need that security of supply. That means that you have to minimize on the risks and the various disruptions when it comes to accessing the raw materials. So these are the main concerns for the importing countries. And in summary, you realize that for the importing countries, the objective is very simple. They need security of supply of minerals at low prices without disruptions. So importing countries, when they're negotiating, they have that goal at the back of their minds. We need minerals, we need security of supply, we need to get the minerals at a low price, and we have to ensure that we minimize the risks when it comes to the disruption of accessing these raw materials. So once you know your main goal, you will formulate your mining policy in a way that that main goal and objective is clearly established. And the mining policy would influence the other laws that the country is going to establish, the other laws and regulations. So it's very important for a country to be very to be focused on their main goal, and also to take into consideration their unique challenges. What are your challenges? What are your opportunities? But most importantly, what do you want to gain from the mining sector? Otherwise, if a country doesn't have clear objectives or goals, it will be hard for them to establish laws that are going to meet the objectives. It will be hard for them to negotiate in a way that is going to support the country. So before the negotiation even starts, know exactly what you want from the mining sector. So we have exporting countries, and exporting countries are mostly concerned with utilizing the resources for their economic development. And exporting countries, especially from Africa, are more concerned with utilizing the resources to eradicate poverty. So in most cases, for developing countries, they have been exporting their raw materials. and they were more focused on getting revenue from these exports. But now things are changing. It's no longer prudent for you to just export materials in their raw form because you're not going to earn a lot of money from that. It's important now to add value. So value addition is becoming very important. That before you export your minerals, add some value so that you can get more revenue from the minerals. Because remember, the countries that these developing countries are dealing with, the importing countries, the importing industrialized countries, they know what they want. They want to get minerals at a low price. So for the exporting country, if you're not going to take any initiative to add value to your minerals, then that means that these countries would always get away with getting your minerals at a low price. So it's very important for also exporting countries to have clear goals. What exactly do you want from your mining sector? Are you actually going to just export all your minerals? Are you going to consider to use those minerals for industrialization? Are you going to consider domestic consumption so that you consume those minerals in your own country? Add value. Use the minerals to establish, like you can use the critical minerals to establish like solar panel industries. Maybe you can start manufacturing solar panels instead of exporting the minerals to China to become a powerhouse for manufacturing solar panels. Maybe you can start manufacturing the solar panels yourself in your country. Maybe you can start manufacturing the wind turbines yourself in your country so that you can consume those minerals, the critical minerals that you have. So it's high time actually for the exporting countries to think about the various ways of how they can use the minerals for industrialization. And that would mean that the mining policies in these countries have to change. The mining laws will have to change, and even the contracts they negotiate will have to change. So, at the end of the day, countries have different priorities when it comes to the mining sector, and those priorities would influence the main objective of the mining policy, and the mining policy would influence the laws and regulations that are going to be established, and still the mining policy would influence how a country is going to negotiate in the mining sector, or how a country is going to negotiate while they're establishing, while they're contracting the investors. So a mining policy is really very key because it's it is the benchmark, it is the foundation of how the country's mining sector is going to be governed. A mining policy is also the foundation of how the country is going to negotiate when it comes to the mining sector. What kind of provisions are you going to go for? Are you going to go with provisions that are focused on value addition? Or are you just going to export all your raw materials to a different country like China? So different countries have different priorities. Importing industrialized countries, they are more focused on accessing minerals at a low price. So for an exporting country, mineral-rich countries, what exactly is your goal? So your goal and objective should influence your mining policy, and this will set a benchmark or a foundation for the governance of the mining sector generally. So that's it about mining policies. And the next thing that in the next discussion, we shall talk about mining laws and other regulations and how they influence the mining sector. Thank you very much and have a lovely day.